Oftentimes, we don't get enticing offers until we wake up in the morning.
Right.
And so this morning, I woke up completely unprepared to find out that Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Jon Meacham is available to talk about his book, His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. And so now here I go, willy-nilly, completely unprepared, but with not enough time to get nervous to say good morning, Jon Meacham.
Yeah.
I hope it was a pleasant surprise.
Oh, absolutely. Huge fans here.
Entirely have been welcome news.
Welcome news, totally unprepared, already in way over my head, sir, but good morning.
Good morning. I mean, given what you usually wake up to, I like to think at least I'm not a virus.
This is true. This is true.
What we're waking up with in 2020 every day. You're not a murder hornet, Jon Meacham. That's the important thing.
We are. Isn't it amazing? We are living in the book of Exodus.
Oh my God, John! I loved what you did at the DNC. And I don't know if people know that you're not a Democrat. You voted for people in both parties. That, as the New York Times tweeted, historian and biographer Jon Meacham got an unusual request from Joe Biden's campaign to speak at the DNC, not to endorse Biden. The request was define the soul of America and do it quick. And that's just like radio. But you know, we are in a battle for the soul of our nation, as Biden says, aren't we? And you just did it so beautifully and eloquently, as you always do. But
thank you. It was a wonderful request. I appreciated it. I'm not a partisan. As you say, I'm George Herbert Walker Bush's biographer. And I'm on MSNBC, so you figure it out.
You're confusing, Jon Meacham.
I know, but what I like to think is that I may not call them right, but I do call them as I see them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can agree or disagree, right? Those are my opinions, and I'm not imposing them on anybody. Just if you want to listen. If you don't. One of the reasons I wanted to write the John Lewis book is here's this amazing figure of exemplary virtue who almost gave his life again and again, insisting that we could, in fact, listen to our better angels. We could, as John would put it, we could redeem the soul of America. And he didn't just say it like, people like me. I just talk, blah, blah, blah. He did it, right? I mean, he was arrested 45 times in his life, 5 times as a member of Congress. He nearly died repeatedly. He spent time at Parchman Prison in Mississippi, which William Faulkner described as destination doom, for the radical action of enforcing a Supreme Court decision that said black folks could ride with white folks on buses.
Yeah.
And it may sound quaint, but look what's going on in Kenosha and everywhere else. I mean, we have an enormous problem in the country that John Lewis believed could be resolved by the possibilities of the country, but we have to focus on the possibilities and not just somehow or another fall back on the idea that we can build walls instead of bridges.
Yeah. Well, I know, and what a timely moment for this book. John, I got to meet him, John Lewis, I think at the last DNC, and I don't think I can say this about anyone else in my life, but I saw him from a distance, and the moral gravity of the man struck you, even from a distance. I mean, I was almost speechless, but I know you've got to know him so well and interviewed him so many times, but just to see him and to meet him, you just sort of felt it, the greatness of the man. It's hard to explain it, isn't it?
You put you had exactly the right verb there. It is, you felt it. You felt his capacity to want to make you a better person, right?
Yeah.
And it was an ambient, tangible courage. And I've had that reaction very few times in my life. I've been lucky, as you have been. We spend our time, because of what we do, with pretty powerful people.
Yeah.
And yet John Lewis embodied a grace and a courage that was rare enough then and is almost totally unfindable today.
Yeah. Well, let's stipulate you they invite you. I just get past security, so there is a difference. But as we speak this morning at this intersection, as you just happened to mention the latest, shooting of an African American in Wisconsin, and this convention, could you hear Kimberly Guilfoyle? Let's just ask the same thing we're asking everyone. That last night, it was shades of Nixon, right? Just this dark, ominous, like, wow, be careful, black people coming. I mean, literally the fact that they had a couple whose only claim to fame is brandishing a gun at peaceful black protesters. It tells you everything you need to know about where we are in this moment, doesn't it?
It does, and I'm the last person to defend Richard Nixon, but it's more George Wallace and Strom Thurmond way back in 1948 and Wallace in 68 than even Nixon. I mean, Nixon at the end of the day followed the rule of law. He gave the tapes over. He resigned. He was willing to accept in extremis. So be clear on what I'm saying. With his back truly against the wall, he believed in preserving the Constitution. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure this president would.
Well, when they said last night, everyone kept saying this is the most important election in our history, and I thought, oh, you mean it's important to reelect him? That's why it's important? I mean, let me teach you a little history, Jon Meacham. Did you know that my...
Let me get a pen.
Yeah.
Did you know... Did you know that my dad ran with Goldwater in '64? I don't know if you know that. My dad was Bill Miller.
Oh, my God. You're not going to believe this. I'm looking at his picture.
Whoa.
So am I.
Miller poster next to a Humphrey poster.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Well, okay. So you know that my dad had to start every speech in 1964 with what Barry meant to say was... But, I don't think Barry Goldwater was a racist, but... racist flocked to him. And, I think as Al Franken said in a documentary about Goldwater, he was wrong about the Civil Rights Act and he made his whole party wrong. And, but this president, I would say, is completely I mean, he is a racist. I'm sorry, I don't know how else you can put it. But, there are sort of shades of history, right? And yet we have never been at this moment, have we?
We haven't. Now, let's be careful here, because Trump is the fullest manifestation of our worst impulses. But those impulses are perennial. And to me, then, the test of our time becomes, do we want to be the people who expanded the promise of the country? Do you want to be John Lewis, or do you want to be Bull Connor?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to be Martin Luther King, or do you want to be Jim Clark, who was the sheriff in Selma? And look, the opposition to the '64 Civil Rights Act, which was widespread, there was a 57-day filibuster in the Senate with it. George Herbert Walker Bush opposed it because he was running on a ticket with Goldwater and your father. History is imperfect. We are imperfect. What John Lewis insisted on, and I use that word advisedly, he insisted that everybody is redeemable and everybody has the capacity, because in his view, we're all creatures of a divine order. We have the capacity to do the right thing. The problem is there are very few John Lewises, and there are a lot of the rest of us.
Yeah.
And so I think that the task of the next 70 days and going forward is going to be saying that we do not want history to look back at our time and have to say, yeah, but. Why can't we just get him to look back and say, yeah?
John, I always say, speaking of John Lewis and, asking us to, be guided by the better angels of our nature, right, as Abraham Lincoln said. I mean, my dad was a prosecutor at Nuremberg, and I know he's been gone since '83, John, but I know for certain what he would have thought about Trump calling Nazis at Charlottesville very fine people, which, I think is part of what impassions Joe Biden that he talked about. That it just, I feel like we sort of already have learned this lesson, good and bad, right and wrong, Nazis bad, right? Yeah. And yet here we are. And
there are some close calls. This election is not one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's time to make good trouble. The book is His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. What a timely, I mean, this book could not be, at a more critical moment. And John, really, what a thrill to come interview you completely unprepared. This was fantastic.
You did great. You might have a future in the business.
Hey.
Let's reserve judgment.
You too, John. You too. Come back anytime. I'll read something before I interview you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate it.
Aw.
Okay, thank you. There he goes.
Huge
Wow.
fan.